Hi, everyone. Good evening. This is Ben Braffman. Today, we're going to do a webinar on the shadow of addiction and how it affects the family. This should be an interesting webinar. Any questions that you have afterward, please email in and we'll go from there. The shadow of addiction and how it affects the family. So the impacts of addiction are many. There's a lot of different aspects to looking at the disease of addiction. If you look at it from a biopsychosocial model of well-being, it impacts your physical well-being, your emotional well-being, your social well-being, and your spiritual well-being. Your physical well-being, it has to do a lot with your gaining weight and losing weight, medical problems such as diabetes and hypertension, GI issues and circulation problems. Mental and emotional has to do with anger, depression, isolation, low self-esteem, and little to no self-worth. The social aspect, you quite often see people change their friends, or they have no friends at all. Negative feedback from close friends that, they're behaving differently than they used to behave. They are hanging out with people that they never used to hang out with. They're lowering their standards. And of course, they lose interest in most activities. And also a big indication and how it impacts individuals is that there's a lack of follow through. There's just a lack of goal setting, and that sort of thing. And then, of course, not looking forward to things. It's very depressive and isolative. They also have misdirected goals, goals that don't really add up to anything. They don't really accomplish too much. The spiritual aspect sometimes is harder to gauge. But many people that are addicted and that it impacts them is that they're angry with God. They blame God for the life that they have instead of taking responsibility. They have issue with a higher power. There's really no such thing as a higher power, and that they're the most powerful entity in their universe. What happens to the family when addiction becomes part of it? So the family unit. The family gets destroyed. Just imagine, if you will, a grenade being thrown into a room full of people and the damage that would do. Families, they experience unusual stress. Normal routines are interrupted by these frightening and harrowing experiences. They're always on edge. They're always stressed out. The phone is always going to ring. And it's going to be bad news, lack of sleep. What the family says publicly and how they feel are two different things. That often isolates the family. So now you can imagine that you've got individuals that are addicted, but now it's spread like a disease into the family members, and the family members are compensating. They're not telling the truth. They're being dishonest. They are succumbing to the disease of addiction. So how they behave and how they feel are two different things. Their feelings get stuffed. Family members shut down. A lot of times you see that alcoholic families, they describe them walking on eggshells. Things are disrupted. There's rules in the family that don't make a heck of a lot of sense. A lot of restrictions, and then the opposite is true too. That there are no restrictions, and there's no rules, and there's no guidance, and there's no structure. Families become what we call pods, fake selves, pseudo selves. And defense mechanisms start to form, and they're complicated. Imagine, if you will, that the disease of addiction slowly but surely isolates an individual. It encircles them. and it slowly but surely takes them away from the people that they love, their family and their friends. Oftentimes, there's a lot of rationalization that goes on between families. They basically are making excuses for the addict's behavior and for their behavior, quite honestly. For example, there are parents that will bring their children to a drug dealer. And the rationale behind that is, well, at least I know where Johnny is getting his drugs from. And they say that with a straight face. And that's troubling. Or another way to rationalize it is that if you're going to use, I'll use with you. So a lot of times parents and family members will use drugs together with the idea being that at least they're safe. There's a lot of intellectualization going on, which is a cornerstone to the disease of addiction. Why do I say this? I say this because the disease of addiction lives in our brain. It's a disease of perception. An addict looks at the world through a cracked lens, and everything related to the disease of addiction for the disease is in somebody's head. They're intellectualizing it. They're disconnecting from their emotions, so they can make sense of anything. We call this addictive logic. If I control my heroin use and I only use on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, then I'm not an addict. That's a form of intellectualizing it, not really putting feelings to it, and really just lying to yourself. You're really only hurting yourself. But that's a big cornerstone to the disease of addiction. There's an exaggeration when it comes to the need for control. Addicts are very busy controlling their drug consumption, how they get it, when they get it, who they get it by, at what hour are they going to get it by, how are they going to feel, anticipation, all of that. Frankly, that power and control is more of the drug than the actual drug that they take. And of course, in families, there's a lot of enabling that goes on. So there's a joke. It's really not that funny, but it is funny, where where a alcoholic drives home one night and crashes their car into a tree, and the next morning the family is out cutting the tree down. That's a classic case of enabling. Obviously, it was the tree's fault. It wasn't the person driving the car's fault. And the merry-go-round goes on and on. One of the most heartbreaking things is the withdrawal from society and from people in general. Families do this. They feel ashamed. They feel guilty. They don't know what to do. They feel terminally unique, like their problem is so bad that they couldn't possibly tell anybody else. That they're scared, literally, to tell people. And of course, families end up self-medicating. When you're depressed and you forget why you're depressed, or you're anxious, or you have bad feelings, well, you want to self-medicate. And honestly, that's at the core of families and addicts issue is self-medicating. I want to feel different. That's the statement that is often said, by individuals that are in a stressful situation. How do I get out of the feelings that I'm in? Well, many times that we self-medicate, smoke marijuana, do drugs recreationally, drink alcohol, spend money, eat food, indulge in sexual activity. So there's a balance that needs to occur within the family system. We call that homeostasis. Components of a balanced system include open communication. That means that there's identified roles within the family unit. Typically, traditionally speaking, you've got your husband and your wife. who are the mother and father, and then you have the children. So you've got these subsystems operating within a balanced system, and there's open communication. For example, the children have a say in the rules of the house. There's a discussion about punishment. It's not to say that parents just roll over and do what the kids want, but it is to say that, you know, there's an explanation to things. Things are understood. Why are there certain consequences? Why are there certain things happening? And so open communication is critical. As I mentioned, children have a voice. You know, they're not just some entities that are in the corner playing. They actually have a voice. They have a say. Their creativity is actually encouraged. Here's a critical one: the rules are consistent among all family members, not just the identified patient or the addict, which of course leads to you know, the black sheep of the family. Well, he's different. He does things differently. We tolerate him. When the rules are consistent, when everybody understands their place, there's balance within the family. And so with homeostasis, that's what you're shooting for. It's not going to be perfect. No system is perfect, but at least you can have some structure, boundaries between systems. So this is an important one. So in the middle of addiction, the boundaries are so poor that sometimes you don't know where the enabler starts and the addict begins. The addict starts, the enabler begins. You just don't know. There's boundaries within a healthy system. For example, the mother and father get to do mother and father kinds of things. They get to set the rules. They get to take care of the family. Dad works, maybe mom works. There's structure. There's a culture within the family unit that's very, very important. And there's also there's a culture and a system with the kids that sometimes it's important for kids to just be kids. Just let them do their thing. Let them play. Let them work it out. Let them problem solve. This is all part of homeostasis. And members of the family can identify their role in the family. It's pretty clear. In the addicted family, it's blurry. It's not so clear, and it can be very, very uncomfortable. Families, the homeostasis has a lot to do with families' ability to create balance within the unit of the family. You think of it as sort of like three branches, three branches of the government. So in a family system, you've got the husband and wife, you've got then the mother and father, and then you've got the children. And then in whatever other type of family system you have, you can just add subsystems to it. But within every system, there's there are rules to follow. There are boundaries to have. Everybody has a say. Everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses, and they just work together as a family unit. In alcoholic and drug addicted homes, there's a huge lack of balance. You often hear about children of alcoholics not knowing if they're going to get a hug or right across the face, when their father comes home. It's very, very painful. Many times, children of alcoholics, they don't even become alcoholics, but they grew up in an environment that they behave very much like an alcoholic, secretive, withdrawn, not able to socialize, not able to have healthy relationships. The shadow of the disease of addiction takes over the family members and transforms them into something else. Zombies, shadows of their former self, if you will. Concepts such as truth and faith become chaotic, and promises are constantly broken. When you live in a system like that, you start to not believe in things. Faith, which people need, encouragement, which people need, is gone. So it becomes very, very sad, not only for the alcoholic or the drug addict, but the family members as well. A lot of instability and certainly a lack of trust. So within homeostasis, there's two types of people. There's the pleaser and the one who withdraws, kind of like a dance. These types may do the following. They yell, they scream, smile when they're in pain, withdraw, cajole, harangue, criticize, overly identify, say they understand but don't, get fed up, laugh when they should cry, lie when they should tell the truth, exaggerate, rationalize, intellectualize, and have delusions of grandeur. These alcoholic families deny family members the opportunity to openly share their feelings about what is happening in their life. And as a result, of course, like I said to you earlier, you isolate and you become something that you're not. Everyday obligations that seem normal put on the back burner and feel very much like a birth. The weight that hangs over the shoulders of family members is extremely strong and debilitating. They must talk about their feelings. They have to have outside positive influence, and they should not self-medicate. Family members in a drug-addicted atmosphere, they tend to avoid. They have lack of genuine emotional connections. They misdirect attention to other problems. For example, Johnny doesn't take the garbage out. Well, he's lazy. No, he's shooting heroin in his room every night, and that's why he doesn't take the garbage out. But the parents will get upset because the garbage is stacking up. So the brain in all of this is impacted greatly. Make no mistake, addiction equals trauma. It is persuasive, imposing. It impacts the physiological state of a person. It weakens mental stability. It is a trauma. The center for flight and fight gets skewed. Normal sort of social behavior gets skewed. Constant feelings of being threatened, that fight or flight or freeze comes into play. The prefrontal cortex is damaged. Reasoning and assessment go out the window. And it's not fully developed until 10 or 11 years old, and it already could be in a lot of trouble. The adolescent brain develops significantly over the first 10 to 15 years. Children need structure and support. They need to have things explained to them by an adult within the family. The idea is that adults need to go to children. Children shouldn't go to adults. That's part of a healthy system. It is through successful family relationships that we achieve a healthy sense of autonomy, problem solving, like I mentioned before. An unhealthy environment leads to imbalance of emotional pain. Families, especially children, internalize their surroundings, make them much more susceptible to the disease of addiction. So there has to be some repair that goes on. With no emotional repair, guilt and shame become a part of how family members behave. Guilt, I did something wrong. Shame, I am wrong. So they're really, really tough, deep, emotional feelings. Very, very strong. With guilt, it's a little easier than shame. With guilt, you did something wrong, so go correct it. You sort of balance in the books. When it's shame, it's a little bit deeper, and that means that I am wrong. So a lot of times healing from shame comes from being with people that have gone through what you've gone through. That's why AA and NA is so effective because it's a mirror of who you are and what you've become. And you can enter into those rooms and not feel judged, and not feel ashamed of yourself. That you could share stories that you've done, that other people have done. Even though they don't know you, they know you. So characteristics of trauma and addiction in adult children: learned helplessness, depression, anxiety, emotional constriction, distorted reasoning, again, addictive logic, doesn't make a lot of sense, loss of trust and faith, cynical, hypervigilant, loss of ability to receive caring and support, they're just shut down, problems with self-regulation, low frustration tolerance, high-risk behaviors. They oftentimes will reenact their family of origin issues, and of course, the desire to self-medicate. So these things that happen typically happen early for family members. Traumatic bonds occur repeatedly without insight into negative behaviors. Nothing is explained. Adult children of alcoholics, they lack intimacy, lack outside support, wide inconsistencies, and high levels of anxiety. These relationships are not all bad, nor are they all good. Typically, adult children of alcoholics, relationships are uneven, resentful, neglecting, angry. These behaviors are repeated in many, if not all, ACOA relationships for getting past their familial trauma. They spend a lot of time trying to forget the past. They spend a lot of time possibly in dead-end jobs, trying to make money, several relationships, and then extravagant spending. And along, of course, with the trauma that goes on in families with the disease of addiction is, of course, the co-occurring disorders. Beyond addiction, addicts and families are left with PTSD, anxiety, depression, all need to be treated. And in fact, they're in some cases worse than the addiction. Characteristics of mental illness can be determined by the range of functioning as it relates to a family's and individual personalities. Co-occurring disorders in families. So you've got in one hand, you've got high intensity families, over-functioning, meaning overachieving, or enmeshment. You don't know where the lines and the boundaries are. Severe impulsivity, grandiosity, you think that you're more important than you actually are. Denial, caretaking to the nth degree, and abuse. And then the other side of it is completely shut down, underfunctioning, disengagement, rigidity, which is a big one, low self-worth, low self-esteem, despair, neglect, and constantly being a victim. So these are all types of how co-occurring disorders seep into the disease. Seep into a family unit. Co-occurring disorders, you need balance, you need emotional stability, progress, not perfection, self-regulation, healthy self-image, reality-oriented, talking things out and caring for others. Patterns of mental illness is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Your mother is your father, role confusion. Where do I end and you begin? An agent of chaos. I'm rigid, I can't change, there's nothing I can do. I'm great, just ask me. I define myself by what I have and what I do. I'm okay and you're not. Denial ain't a river in Egypt. I'm the caretaker and that's how I identify myself. The abused becomes the abuser. I am a victim. So characteristics and traits of a mental illness within a family system: they avoid intimate relationships, reenact trauma, unconsciously project unhealed pain and anger into present day, enmeshed in intimate relationships, distancing from others, blow up at small things, see partners as good and bad. In other words, they split, misread signals from others, and they get paranoid. So what's the solution? There's no one way to do this hurricane, meaning that it's a storm and sometimes you need to ride it out, but you need to be together to do it. You have to ask yourself, if you woke up tomorrow and all your problems go away, what would your life look like? And that's another way of asking, what are your goals? What's important to you? Get off the drugs and alcohol. Actively listen. Avoid double bind communications at all costs. Double bind communication is a mother saying to a child, come here, I want to give you a hug. I love you. The child comes, and before the embrace, the mother looks at the child and says, what are you doing here? You smell. And as the child walks away, the mother says, what are you doing? Come here, I told you I wanted a hug. First, the child comes, mother pushes away again. That's double bind communication. Sometimes kids have the answer. Many, many times, having a powerful family means that the kids know what's really going on in the family, and they're the ones that come up with solutions. Know your skills as a person and a professional. Know your limitations. Exercise, diet correctly, get over yourself and get a hobby, and of course have faith.